Hello, everybody. Welcome back
What up,
to
though?
Blazing Soul Podcast.
What's going on up there? Blazing Soul Podcast every Wednesday, 7 Central, 8 Eastern. Here to bring you the tea. What's going on? Current events. Talk about how people are feeling, what's going on in the community, as well as highlighting role models, community leaders, business entrepreneurs, people who are making it happen and don't get the exposure that some do. There's a lot of podcasts out there now. Most of them deal with celebrities and athletes and things of that nature, but there's not a lot dedicated to just the common guy out there doing their time, their money to better the community. So that's what we're here to do, is to highlight, give them their flowers now, and also kind of get their perspective, their professional opinion on what's going on in the world and how can we help and change that. There has been a ton of stuff going on since the last time we had this particular guest. We value his opinion greatly. The man is a PhD and has many modalities as far as psychiatry is concerned, from sports psychology to family to marriage. He runs the gambit as far as helping people with communication and relationships, no matter what that relationship may be. This is the verdict came out, and a lot of people have varying opinions concerning the verdict of the black man that was killed, and I use that term correctly, killed, murdered. Basically a guy put a knee, or a cop put a knee on the person's neck, and in turn kept it there long enough to kill the person. That, along with a lot of the Asian hate that's going on, a lot of police shootings that we've had recently, and this is nothing new for anyone who has kept their eyes and ears open as to what's going on. The question is, number one, why is it happening continuously after we have marched and protested and rioted and did everything possible to, kind of shed light on our plight? It still happens. So we are bringing in a professional to talk about what goes through people's minds, hopefully what some can do to change these things, and just give a general perspective on what's going on and his thoughts from a professional standpoint. So with that, I'd like to bring in Dr. Forrest.
Yes, let's see. Dr. Forrest is coming right now. Hello.
Hello.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing good, thank you. It's been a long day, but I'm doing well.
I hear you. I got your text like, hey man, I'm on my way. I'm coming. We just want to say first and foremost, we truly thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule to be on the podcast and kind of shed light and give your opinions on various topics. There's one thing when there's the water cooler talk, so to speak, about what's going on in the area and community in our country. But it's quite something different when we have the perspective from a true professional. So we thank you for that.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Are we matching? Are you?
I think we are.
Are we matching? We did not do that on purpose, but I guess we're vibing. So this is going to be a great show tonight, huh?
Yeah. Well, good observation.
Yes.
Very good.
Okay.
Great minds think alike.
Absolutely.
Before we start getting into some of the topics that I want you to kind of shed light on and give your perspective on, why don't you tell people briefly tell them about your background and what you do?
Okay, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. So in my office, I see a lot of patients, different situations. I see children. I see teenagers, young adults. I see the elderly. I see people who are going through difficult times, whether it's depression, anxiety, PTSD. Also see couples who are having difficulties in their relationships, people who are thinking about getting engaged or becoming married, so they may want to have a fresh set of eyes to look at their situations. Also, I do a lot of psychological testing in terms of intellectual functioning, what's someone's capacity to understand certain things. I do testing for the courts, do some consultation with business organizations. And as you mentioned earlier, I do some work in the area of sports psychology.
Wow. That's a lot.
It is.
That's interesting, though, with the court thing.
So, from a court perspective,
Yeah.
are you giving the court a
analysis of the criminal?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is it analysis, or is it judging whether or not they're competent to stand trial? What is involved in that?
Yes.
Well, it entails all of those things, but mainly for the courts, they will want to see what someone's intellectual capacity is, and then to be able to make recommendations in regards to treatment or certain interventions. Do they need to be placed in a facility? Can we rehabilitate this person if they get competent treatment? Will they be able to turn around and function effectively in society?
Okay.
Interesting.
Well, we wanted to have you on because, like I said, there not only was the trial for, I don't want to mispronounce his name, but Chauvin,
yes.
the police officer who was tried and convicted of murder, basically, for lack of a better term. It has been in the media and it's been talked about, consistently and constantly about not only the death, but whether or not this man will be convicted and what that all entails. So first, let me ask you, what is your thought process on the verdict itself?
Well, I think the verdict was a right verdict. It was a good verdict. He killed a man, an African-American male.
Yes.
And the whole world saw it. People who watched it. So the evidence is conclusive that murder took place. And unfortunately for a lot of police officers who kill people, especially African Americans, people of color, we rarely see significant accountability.
Right.
But in this particular case, there was accountability. So I think the nation, the world, are in agreement with the verdict that came down.
Okay. Now, detractors of the verdict said that, and what I hear a lot is that he did something wrong, but it's not murder because he didn't intentionally kill him. He, for lack of a better term, he was negligent in his duties that caused the death of that young man. What's your thought on that?
Well, whether he was negligent or not, we don't know what his motivation was.
Right.
But in light of everything, George Floyd is no longer.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So some responsibility has to take place.
Okay.
Now, a lot of people who viewed that incident will say that the officer showed no remorse for what he was doing.
Yes.
Many say that he looked pompous. It looked as if he was enjoying what he was doing.
Right.
There was no remorse. So in terms of what others will say, the tape, the video speaks volume.
Sure.
The man was subdued. He was handcuffed. He was on the ground. There was no resistance.
Right.
So we have to, exactly. We have to look at everything. And I will say this, a number of years ago, my partner and I, we used to evaluate police officers.
Oh.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. We were called in by certain cities to assess individuals who wanted to become police officers.
Oh,
Okay.
wow. I didn't know
So,
that.
oh yes, they do what's called psychologicals.
Hmm.
Okay. Now I don't do that work anymore,
Right.
but I'm assuming that they still do that.
Right.
And one of the theories behind psychological testing of police officers is that once we give you a gun,
Mm-hmm.
you can pretty much do anything.
Right.
And we talked about the fact that once you're a police officer,
Mm-hmm.
you have a tremendous amount of latitude.
Yes.
A police officer can drive into a field and just sit there,
Mm-hmm.
and no one will question what
Right.
that person is doing there. Why is that police officer there?
Right.
So they have a significant amount of power.
Mhm.
They carry a presence. They have authority. So when we evaluated police officers, one of the things that we did is that we gave them intelligence tests.
Hmm.
And how we went about looking at those officers
Mm-hmm.
is we put them in tiers,
Wow.
and we are looking at who's scoring at the highest level.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And the rationale for that is that we know that they have to make split-second decisions,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
decisions of life and death.
Right.
So we wanted individuals who were intellectually competent.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So we're taking those who are scoring at the 95th percentile,
Wow.
at the highest level.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we look at that intellectual part.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also look at the psychosocial makeup of that person. And we gave what's called a BQ, which is a background questionnaire.
Mm-hmm.
And on that background questionnaire, we're asking them about 670 questions. Okay. So it's thorough, it's comprehensive.
Mm-hmm.
We want to see what is this person looking like in terms of their personality, in terms of their history.
Right.
Are they a good citizen, so to speak?
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that we can never test for
Mm-hmm.
is what is in a person's heart.
Right.
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 Okay. What does their heart look like?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Does it constitute things that are evil,
Right.
things that are negative?
Mm-hmm.
Is this person a racist?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have a racist attitude towards certain minority groups,
Mm-hmm.
people of color, cultural groups? We can never test for that.
Right.
Right. Right.
Okay. So becoming a police officer should not be something that is easily fallen into,
Mm-hmm.
because you need to have a good heart, that you respect people because you're serving the people.
Mm-hmm.
And it said that if you don't love the people, how can you lead the people?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And
Very-
people look up to police officers.
Yes.
So they have to be held to a very, very high standard.
Exactly.
And we also know that when we're testing them, we're giving someone a gun.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. And
So
the
we
ability
want
to enforce the law as well.
to enforce the law.
Yeah.
But it's important that the police officer has good character,
Right.
that they come from a good family background, that they're psychologically stable, and that they're competent because they're making decisions,
Right.
life changing decisions all the time. So being a police officer is not an easy job.
Sure, undoubtedly. So let me ask you, when you guys evaluate someone and they come back with something less than 95%,
They don't get to
are you guys' recommendation, concrete and that's it? They won't become it, or are there times that they look at your recommendations, see your recommendations, but they use other factors as well to determine whether or not someone can become a police officer? So do you guys, for lack or quintessentially, do you guys have the final say on whether or not someone becomes a officer?
Well, what we do is we provide the data. Here's what the data says. The data says that this person intellectually is brilliant.
Okay.
However, when we look at their personality, there's some things that we're concerned about.
Right. Wow.
So we give them the data
Mhm.
and they make their decisions based on the data that we give them.
So they could still potentially bring someone on that has some
Issues.
Exactly. And here's the important factor.
Mhm.
Not everybody can function at the highest intellectual level.
Right.
That's going to weed out a lot of people.
Mhm.
Okay.
But despite the fact that they don't have the intellectual capacity of someone who's functioning at the 95th to 97th percentile,
Mhm.
personality-wise, some things are looking really, really good.
Got it.
And their background questionnaire in terms of their upbringing,
Mhm.
experiences that they've been involved in, how they're treating people,
Yeah.
have they been in problems with have they been in conflict with the law? Have they been in conflict with family, other people? We look at all of that.
That's so interesting that you could evaluate based on asking just questions. That's awesome.
Well, the tests or the instruments that we use
Mhm.
are very sophisticated.
Yeah.
Okay, you have certain tests, like, for example, the MMPI.
Mhm.
That's probably the most widely used personality inventory in the world.
Okay.
Wow.
So when people are answering questions and we look at certain validity scales,
Mhm.
we know right away if someone's being honest or not.
Oh.
And based on those things, it's easy to have a good picture of what's going on. Is someone trying to present themselves in a favorable light?
Yes. Yes.
If the lie scale is above a certain level, it invalidates the protocol. So these tests are very, very sophisticated, and they give us the information that we need to make good decisions or to make a diagnosis on a person.
Wow.
Now, are those tests kind of like, I know there has been times when I have been up for a position and they'll give you a personality test and they'll ask the same question a variety of ways to see whether or not your response will alter based on how the question is phrased. Is that some of the tactics that you guys use to see whether or not someone's lying or not?
Yeah, we want to see if there's a consistent pattern to a person's response to the information that we're trying to retrieve.
Okay. Do they keep that information? Point taken as far as Chauvin is concerned. Is that information on record so that if something like this happens, they can bring out and pull back out some of this information to be used to help or to hinder a police officer?
It depends on the police department, because some police department may keep the data, some may not keep the data. We also know that when it comes to psychological testing, that there's time limitations to that. For example, we may keep it for a year or 2 years, and then we may have to reevaluate someone to see if things have changed. So every department probably does things differently.
Okay.
People could change.
Yeah, I mean, people can change over time, and especially being in a job that's stressful, definitely your attitude and mood could change depending on how long you've been on the force and some of the things that you've dealt with while
Yes.
you were a police officer.
Yeah, your experience.
You mentioned that you guys do evaluate because people or police officers have to make split-second decisions. And some of those decisions are life and death. Two incidents that happened that kind of play into that thought process. One was the officer that pulled their gun instead of their taser and killed the young man, which her rationale behind that was that everything was going on so quickly and she went for her taser. She made a mistake and grabbed the gun. What is your initial reaction to that?
That's a difficult case.
Okay.
Very, very difficult case. Now, if my memory serves me correctly, there was 2 or 3 officers.
Yes.
Okay.
3 officers. Yes.
3 officers.
Mm-hmm.
So you would think that 3 officers would be able to subdue a young person.
Yes.
Okay. So when a police officer comes to a scene, it's important that they appraise the situation carefully.
Right.
Okay. That's the most important thing, is that they conceptualize what's going on in order to respond in an appropriate manner.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I'd have to look at that tape again,
Okay.
but it seems as if they came with a contentious agenda. And if you look at a lot of police officers, their demeanor, how they approach the situation,
Mm-hmm.
is extremely important, because when people get pulled over, right away their anxiety level is going through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So I think there needs to be a lot of de-escalation training,
Right.
because as people, it's easy for us to escalate a situation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Many of us can do that very, very well, based on our tone, our posture, all of that. So the person who's being pulled over is extremely anxious.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I also believe that when a police officer comes to a situation, they're anxious as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
Especially if it's an African American.
Mm-hmm.
And we already know that the research tells us, and talking to a lot of police officers,
Mm-hmm.
and it's common knowledge,
Yeah.
that when they approach an African American, and the bigger the African American person is,
Mm-hmm.
and the darker he is,
Oh, wow.
the more anxiety there is for that police officer who's pulling him over. We know that.
Mm.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's reality.
Mm.
We also know that a group of researchers have put together a database that contains the books, magazines, articles that an average college educated American would read over their lifetime. Now, it allows us to look into this database and see how Americans have seen words that are paired together.
Okay.
So, for example, when the word black appears in American society or culture, what co-occurs with that? Poor, violent,
Wow.
Yeah.
religious, lazy,
Yeah.
cheerful, and dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Okay?
Yeah.
So the police, having that knowledge,
Yes.
when they pull over an African American, that's in their mind.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Now, if we look at what occurs with the word white,
Mm-hmm.
progressive, conventional, stubborn, successful, educated, very different.
Very different.
Very
Wow.
different.
Yeah, that's amazing. And to the point that you said, assessing the situation, and they came up to this situation, kind of, I won't say aggressively, but the woman police officer was a 20+ year veteran, but she was teaching one of the other officers because they were new. So she was a trainer. And
Yes.
I just have to believe that, that played a part in it as well. If I'm training somebody and a situation occurs, I'm going to, kind of show them that I can handle any situation
Yes.
and, take care of it, the way I see fit. And I'm not going to take any disrespect because I'm in front of not only my peers, but someone who is learning from how I deal with situations.
Right.
So I believe that played a part in it as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors.
Hmm.
Okay, a tremendous amount of variables at play. So when a police officer pulls over a black male and overreacts to an unarmed black male
Hmm.
and perceives him to be dangerous
Mm-hmm.
and violent, sometimes we're not necessarily dealing with an inherently bad police officer,
Right.
but they've been socialized
Mm-hmm.
to perceive certain people in a negative way.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That is,
True.
yeah, that's disheartening. That, because someone has a preconceived notion of a person or a particular race of people, that it can end in death. That's very harsh. Um, I've had people ask, why is this just not happening, and why it must be because of the pandemic that this violence is occurring. And I explained to him that this has been going on, for as long as I can particularly remember,
Yeah.
and before my time as well. I think one of the big differences is everyone has a camera at all times. Everyone has a video recorder at all times. So it's coming to light more because people are able to capture these instances and show the world, exactly what is going on as far as people of color are concerned.
Yeah.
One of the instances that has gotten a lot of scrutiny is the officer who shot and killed the young lady who was in a fight, and she had a knife, a butter knife, and he killed her because he believed that she was going to try to kill another one of the teenagers there. Now, when you see the footage, what jumps out at me is that there were other officers on the scene when he got there. So, number one, you're coming into the scene not knowing exactly what's going on. Other officers are there, but you're the one that fired your weapon, number one. And then number two, are there other ways besides shooting and killing someone immediately that you can de-escalate a situation like that? Are you kind of privy to what I'm speaking of as far as this situation is concerned?
Well, that situation, I'm certainly aware of it. Unfortunately, I haven't had the opportunity to really look at the tape at length,
Okay.
but it seems like it's a situation where he came in, as you said, uh, it seemed like there are officers present before he got there.
Right.
Okay. So once again, I'd have to see it in order to really dissect it.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
he made a split second decision.
Right.
Now, I know some people have said to me, well, how comes he didn't use a taser? So I think that's a relevant question as well. But not seeing everything, it's hard for me to give a good assessment of it.
Right.
But I know that police officers, they come into a situation and they do have to sometimes react. And the reaction has significant consequences.
Yes.
And they do make mistakes.
Mhm.
And that was a tragic mistake. But I guess that particular officer felt that that was his best course of action. Now, I'm hoping that a review will be done, but I'm wondering how comes he was the one who acted
Mhm.
as opposed to the others who were there.
There.
So once again, I'd have to be able to look at that to be able to formulate a good opinion.
Right. Right. Now, let me ask you this. I've been told that, and because, one of the thoughts I had was that even if he thought that she was going to cause harm to some of the other teenagers that were there, um, did it have to be a kill shot? Did it have to be a shot in the chest or back area, that we know, 9 times out of 10 can take a person's life?
Yeah.
And I was told that officers are trained that
To
when
shoot
they
to
pull
kill.
their weapon, they're trained to take
Yeah.
a life.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, that is part of the training to become a police officer, is that you are trained to kill once you take out your gun.
Right.
You're not looking to injure.
Right.
Mhm.
The decision is shoot
Yeah.
to kill.
Kill. Right.
So that is a form of the training for police officers.
How do you feel about that training? Do you think that is just, or do you think that because usually when they pull their weapon, it's a life or death situation? So do you feel that's valid, or do you feel that, a shot in the arm, a shot in the leg, some way to disable a person as opposed to taking their life? And once again, I'm not a police officer in any way. So, I know that is something that I'm just kind of giving my opinion on, but it would seem that, you have a baton, you have a taser, you have pepper spray, you have all these items at your disposal. And then if it does come to pulling your weapon, that it shouldn't have to always be to kill.
Yeah. Well, over the years, in terms of police training, that has always been the mandate, is shoot to kill. So maybe that needs to be looked at, to be examined, to make some ramifications. Because yes, to the ordinary citizen, they're thinking, why not shoot to disable?
Right.
But that is how police officers are trained, is to take a life once they pull that gun. So certainly I think we can look at that. But once again, that would be a different type of training,
Yes.
because now you're talking about shooting a limb,
Right.
and that's much different training as opposed to shooting at a larger target,
Right.
because you still have the possibility that you aim for that limb and you miss.
Right.
Yes.
And
Right.
the bottom line is that that gun has been discharged and that bullet can travel to someplace else and
Right.
take something out or do some other collateral damage. So that is maybe something that they may need to ramify, but not sure if that will happen based on the fact that that is how police training has taken place over the years. It's just like in combat warfare, the goal is to shoot to kill.
Right. Right. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Because you had such extensive background in working with police officers and police departments, um, if they called upon you to make changes to the process of becoming a police officer and in turn police training, is there anything that, and once again, this is not to bash officers in any way, because police officers are public servants that are well needed. Most of them are good people who are putting their life on the line so that us as citizens can go about our daily routine. So I don't want to disparage them in any way, but if you just off the top of your head, could make changes or recommendations to the training and the hiring of police officers, do you think you would change anything?
Yeah, I would certainly look to make some changes, and here's probably where I would start. You want to look at what's called the implicit training for implicit bias.
Okay.
Okay, so with that, people come with their stereotypes. They come with pre-reflective attributions of particular qualities by an individual in a certain culture or social group.
Okay.
So you want to really start with implicit bias.
Okay.
You want to give everybody a fair chance, not because this person is Caucasian or person of color. Person might be a Mexican from another country. No, come with a presupposition that this is a human being.
Right.
Okay, this is a human being, and he has what's called the breath of God in him, just like you and I. So you want to really look at that implicit bias, and you want to hammer that home.
Right. Okay.
And with that implicit bias comes respect. Because when we look at young African Americans, one of the things that they're always being taught in the streets is, I got to get my respect.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that police officers tend to render that.
No.
No, not at all. No.
Okay. So I would make some type of a ramification there. Because if you saw that video of how the African American lieutenant was treated from Virginia,
Yep, I see
those
that.
two police officers confronted him.
Mm-hmm.
There was no respect.
No.
And as he said, he was serving his country.
Right. Right.
Okay. So definitely training in implicit bias and how to approach people in a respectful, non-confrontative manner. If you have your gun drawn already, the other person is at a disadvantage.
Right. Or your hand on your gun, or
That's
know.
right.
Yeah.
Right. So we know that police officers are in a position of power.
Yes.
But you don't have to hammer your power to the next person
Right.
who's already in a subservient position.
Yes.
Police officers, when they confront someone, they're in an asymmetrical relationship with that individual, meaning that they have all the power.
Right. Right.
So disperse your power in a respectful way. So I think that needs to be taught.
Definitely.
Also, de-escalation training. Sir, I'm pulling you over because your taillight is out.
Right.
Can you tell me what happened? Were you aware of that? So you can confront people, but you can also do it in what's called a carefrontative way. Okay? Because you have that gun.
Right. Right. Right.
So someone is going to be humble
Right.
when they see a gun being pointed at them.
Right. Right.
So you want to take that training, sensitivity training, de-escalation training, implicit bias training. Those are important things for police officers. And you want to do some building of relationships.
Yes. They need relationships.
Because that's how you can connect with people. Okay? You can't really influence someone unless you build a relationship with that person. Okay? They can show grace. You know what? I'm going to let you call someone
Mhm.
and let them get you home.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
So you've got to learn how to appraise a situation carefully.
Mhm.
In my training as a psychologist, one of the things that they're always teaching us when we're on our internship is you have to be able to conceptualize a case. It's called case conceptualization.
Mhm.
You have to know what's going on.
Mhm.
So when you size up that case, you're going to know what you need to do to help this person.
Mhm.
So I think they need that case conceptualization, how to maneuver yourself, how to deal with the situation,
Mhm.
not to escalate it,
Right.
but that de-escalation training.
Mhm.
So those are some of the things that I would start in terms of police reformation, police retraining.
Mhm.
And I don't know if a lot of police departments are doing psychological testing,
Mhm.
but I would certainly be in favor of that
Right.
because that gives you a tremendous amount of information about a person.
Right.
And you can utilize that information to make a good decision about who to hire, who not to bring onto the force.
Mhm. Now, what do you think of the quote unquote blue line as far as other police officers having a feeling that the police officer, their partner, whoever it may be, is not handling a situation correctly? It goes bad, and the officer in question might get into trouble, but the other officers around don't get into trouble, but they're complicit in the situation that happens. Point taken with the Chauvin case, I don't believe the other officers are going to be convicted of a crime. What do you think? Do you think they should be held accountable? How do you think that should play out?
They should be held accountable. Let me say that first and foremost. And I'm going to give you my rationale for that.
Okay.
When it comes to police officers, they're in what's called a subculture,
Yes.
meaning that they're in a tight kinship with the people that they work with,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
and they cover for each other.
Right.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
They're in a very tight subculture.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
But if you go to Leviticus chapter 19, God says, don't stand by idly while your brother's life is in danger.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Right.
That's what the Almighty God says.
Right.
So we have a responsibility to do something when we see our neighbor's life in jeopardy.
Right.
So that is why I believe that the police officers that were accompanying Chauvin,
Mm-hmm.
whether they were rookies or not,
Mhm.
they knew that what was going on was wrong.
Right.
And when you have bystanders telling you that what you're doing is wrong, that speaks volume.
Right.
Because a lot of psychological studies have been conducted on bystander apathy, where they see people in trouble and they turn a blind eye
Mhm.
Right.
because they don't want to get involved.
Right. Right.
But the crowd there that was watching what was taking place,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
they were vocal.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
And a lot of them wished that they had intervened.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But for fear of their own safety,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't.
Right.
Right.
But
Right.
regrettably, they wish that they had.
Right.
So I believe that the officers should be held accountable because they knew that what was going on was wrong.
Right.
And their job is to uphold the law so that the community can have faith and trust in them when they see them doing their job. So that was a failure on the other officer's part.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, to the point that when the medical team arrived, the ambulance and the paramedics, he was still on his neck, and they had to ask, "Hey, can we get in here? Can you get off of him so that we can give him treatment?" That alone should have really showed how this went far too far. Um, Another question I can ask is that a lot of people say it's because our society is so gun pro-gun. We are one of the countries that we have enough guns for every man, woman, child in our country. So that because guns are so prevalent and, for lack of a better term, championed because of the NRA and people talking about their amendment rights, that has kind of devolved our culture into a shoot first mentality. Do you give any credence to that?
Well, that's a good question. We have the right to bear arms.
Yes.
Okay, that's our Fifth Amendment right.
Mm-hmm.
However, we must be careful with that right,
Right.
because with that right comes great responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be very, very careful, because life is precious.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
to take a life is not a light matter.
Right. Right.
So with that right comes great responsibility. So that's how I would answer your question.
Do you think the process for obtaining a gun, um, are we doing everything we can to vet who should have a gun and who shouldn't, as far as the background checks and tests that we do, or do you think that more should be done? What is your opinion on gun control and whether or not we're doing an adequate job?
Well, it does appear that we need to do more concerning the checks for getting guns.
Okay.
So we have to do an extensive background check on people who are obtaining guns.
Okay.
And if they have certain histories, if they're struggling in certain areas, then we have to take the time to really look at what's going on with that person. Because a lot of mass murders could have been prevented if adequate checks had been done.
There was even talk that before a person does obtain their permit, that they should have to spend an hour with a counselor or psychologist or something along those lines. But many people say that that's infringing upon your rights to make you go and have to sit in front of a counselor or a psychologist for any type of period of time. Do you think that would help if they had to sit in front of a counselor for an hour? I know that's such a small amount of time to judge a person's character and their mental health, but do you see that as helping, or do you think that really wouldn't help the situation as a whole?
I think what would help the situation is to really do significant background checks.
Okay.
Okay, look at this person's life experiences.
Hmm.
What has taken place in their lives? How have they grown up?
Hmm.
How were they raised? How has this person walked out their lives? Have they been in trouble with the law? Have there been significant trauma in their lives? Have they been struggling in certain areas?
That makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense. So let me ask you, and this I don't know. I've seen in movies sometimes, but you don't know the validity of a particular movie, but that officers do have to see counselors sometimes after an event where they had to discharge their firearm, but just in the general, um, you know, uh, doing of their duties, that there are times that they do have to sit in front of a counselor and talk. Is that true that, on occasion, or, I don't know, is there some type of recertification for officers or anything of that nature? But is it mandatory for them to sit and talk with counselors?
certain police departments, based on what the officer has experienced, will direct them to seek counseling. Okay. I have seen police officers in my own practice who have gone through difficult situations, because I will say this, being a police officer is not an easy job.
Right.
There's tremendous stressors
Yep.
that they experience daily, constantly. Okay, so it is not an easy job.
Right.
It's laden with problems. Police officers struggle in many, many different areas of their lives. But I have seen them in my office, so I have a good idea of the stress that they take on and that they experience on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Now, but that's not that counseling isn't mandatory, is it?
Well, once again, I believe certain departments,
Okay, we'll make
okay, it's like EAP, Employee Assistance Program. When they're seeing certain things, they're going to make a recommendation.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
I don't know if they mandate it now, but they will make a recommendation. I think you need to see someone and talk about this situation.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Doctor. Now, before you go, I always have to, you're a sports psychologist, so I always have to hit you with a sports question as well.
Yes.
We talked last year during the playoffs. LeBron and the Lakers took it all, but LeBron is hurting. Hurting bad. AD just came back from a major injury. Number one, do you think they're going to rally and win it again? And if not, who do you think is going to win?
That's a great question. Now, I've told you before that there's a few athletes that I just wouldn't bet on them. Okay.
Right.
LeBron is one of them.
Okay.
But right now we don't know if he's coming back or not.
Right. That's true.
Okay. If he comes back, despite all the prolific talent that we're seeing right now, if he comes back, they have a good chance to repeat.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to state that. If he comes back and he's healthy, he has a good chance. They have a good chance of repeating. Okay.
Okay.
Now
go
what's
ahead.
that?
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I'll say it afterwards. Go ahead.
Yeah. So if LeBron comes back, the Lakers certainly have the potential to repeat. There's some good teams out there right now.
Yes.
Brooklyn Nets. They're right there.
Yeah. I think what do you think about all the guys coming to the Brooklyn Nets? You don't think that that's like a super team that's already won it, basically?
Well, they haven't won anything yet.
Okay.
But they're in a position that looks very strong. Okay.
Yeah.
Milwaukee is looking strong, but if we look at their history in the playoffs, the history doesn't bode well for them.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, historically. So we have to look at that. Okay. Utah, I haven't seen them play much, but they're at the top.
Yes.
Okay, so we can't take them for granted.
Right.
Phoenix is looking pretty good.
Very good.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah. So I think it's really wide open in 2021.
Yes.
If LeBron doesn't come back, obviously there's definitely going to be a new champion.
Yes. He's been hurt for a minute, actually. What do you think of Chris Paul and what he's done for Phoenix? They went from barely making the playoffs, playing in the play-in tournament, to having the best record in the league. And do you think, even though his stats might not be on par with a LeBron or a Kevin Durant, that he should be considered for MVP with what he's done with that young team?
You have to give Chris Paul consideration. Chris Paul, he's a leader.
Yes.
He's a player.
Yes.
And there's a lot of players that make others around them exceptional.
Right.
Chris Paul is one of those,
Yes.
just like LeBron.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. These are players that have that chemistry. They have that motivation.
Mm-hmm.
They know how to get people playing better. So that's a dangerous team right there. And yes, he should be in the talks
Mm-hmm.
for MVP, but I don't think he's going to get it.
Yeah, I think it's because of the stats. You know, he has good stats, but they're pedestrian in nature when you put them up against a LeBron or a KD, or even in Denver with the Jokic. They have those eye-popping stats. But what he's done with the Phoenix Suns,
Yes.
I never would have foreseen that. Ever.
Yes. Yeah. But it's going to be an interesting playoff.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Wholeheartedly.
Yes.
So tell people before we get out of here, if they need your assistance, your counseling, any of these services that you provide, or they know someone who might need those services, how can they get in touch with you?
I would say the best way is to reach out to my assistant, Renee, and she can be reached at 616-550-0744. People can call her or they can text her.
Okay.
Or they can send an email to drforrest.faith@gmail.com. And they can also call the office 616-249-8486.
Awesome. Hey, man, thank you very much for coming on. It's always very insightful when you come on. I will say that we have you on record again this year with your prediction of who's going to win. So we're going to hold you to that, as we always do. And
Thank you.
When the playoffs start, I'm going to have you back on again so we can talk about it as we did last year. You're going to give us your picks. I'm going to give my picks, and our audience is going to give their picks, and we're going to see what happens.
Thank you. I appreciate the two of you. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you.
And you guys have a beautiful evening.
And since the last conversation, we haven't had any disagreements. So
because you backed me up. I love that you backed me up. That was perfect. It was on live TV. That was perfect.
So there you go. There's a live testimonial for you.
That's good. That's great. I'm going to send you the bill.
There you go. All right, man.
All right.
Have a great night. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Bye-bye.
Forrest.
All right, man. It's always a great time when Dr. Forrest comes on. He provides his knowledge, wisdom, and insight. But we kind of keep it jovial when we can. It's always awesome when we kind of bring the sports into it. I will say that last year I picked the right one going all the way up until the finals, and then he did pick the finals winner. But I was consistent throughout. I think I'm going to get me a business card that says sports picker or coach or something along those lines, and I'm gonna start a new business. But it was definitely good information that he gave us. I didn't even know that he in his past used to evaluate officers, which gives us another great introspect into what exactly is going on when an officer or when they're hiring an officer, and what goes into that, and also what his thoughts are on, people are talking about defund the police. I'm in complete disagreement. I think that we need to pour more money into the police departments because it's such an important job that 6, 8 weeks, 9 weeks of training. That's nothing. When I worked for AT&T in their advertising department, we spent 8 weeks, away from home in Troy, Michigan, from 8 to 5, learning nothing but digital marketing and how it goes. So if I'm spending 8 weeks, 8 hours a day learning about marketing, then it definitely should be more involved with such a important position.
Definitely, and I think even communication skills training and just diversity training,
Ethnicity
like a lot of
training.
training. Like it should be really extensive training, like you mentioned, because they do, and they're only human. We love our police officers. There are lots of great officers. They're just those bad ones that make a bad name for the police officers. And definitely, I believe some more training, and just, they're only human as well, so just as we see the imperfect humans that we are, they are also, in the same position. And so if we can weed out and process of elimination and weed out all the bad ones that are causing harm to the community, or even training, maybe it's not intentional. Maybe they don't go out to just be bad guys, and a majority of them have a wonderful heart, and they went into the police force as a way to serve the community. And I believe they truly do want to serve the community. But I think that giving them more tools to do their job better is something that should be up for the conversation.
And just like in any work environment, there are different personalities. So
Yes.
do I believe most police officers are out to help people and don't have a preconceived notion to kill people?
Right.
Yes, I believe that.
Yes.
Do I believe that we have some tough guys and some guys who can't take confrontation well and lash out and don't know how to control their emotions? Yes. And do I also believe that that's learned behavior, so that if you see someone acting that way for how many years, if I'm a police officer for 3 years, this guy is 10 years and he acts that certain way, that would be learned behavior that I would kind of garner from him. And then I might start, we're overreacting on situations. So, once again, our podcast, or this particular podcast, is not to demean police or anything of that nature. It is to shed light on a lot of the process of becoming a police officer, dealing with situations. We had a professional come on and give us his opinion and his insight into not only what they go through, but how they get there and how they become a police officer. It will give us all more knowledge and understanding as to, number one, the cops have a tough job, man.
Yes.
But whenever you have other people's lives in your hands, you have to have, as the doctor said, you have to have a heart.
Lead with your heart.
Yeah, they have power in 99% of situations. I likened it, and I'm not likening the community to children, but I liken it to a toddler. A toddler can get mad and act out, but a toddler is no threat to you. You hold all the power in that situation. So for people who lash out and beat their kids heavily, and Child Protective Services gets involved, and things of that nature, that child doesn't have the power. So you need to control your feelings, because there's no power transfer in that situation. You have all the power. So with that thought in mind, there's no reason to overreact, because at the end of the day, 99% of the time, you control the situation. And on that note, everybody be cool out there, be safe.
Yes.
A lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff that people have to handle, from the pandemic to jobs to, what have you. So be mindful of that. Be compassionate to others, knowing that you don't know what they're going through at this time.
Yes.
And let's watch out for each other. We might, I don't know how we're going to do this next week, because we are scheduled to go on another trip. No, tell them. Okay. I'm not going to say it, because she told me to be quiet. So I'm going to chill out. But we'll have something for you guys next week. And we will continue to do what we do, because we think we're making a difference. So on that note, you got anything to say, right?
No, I think that is it.
Okay.
I think that's it.
Everybody be cool out there. Yes. Be safe. Watch each other's back, and watch your own six. Peace out.
Lock on.